Hello and welcome back to the Talia Chester YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over episode 4 of Chess Masters The Endgame, and it is the first episode of which I am a part of, so I'm very excited to actually be able to talk about it finally. It's been it's been so long since we actually recorded it, so I've been so excited to talk about it for so long now, so I finally get the chance to. I do apologise for this episode being very slightly late. Next week, the episode should be out on Tuesday, so the day after the episode is aired. We'll go over all of the games that are played. But today we're going over the 3 games that were played. So it was me versus Richie, Dimma versus Nessie, and Craig versus Kel. And then we're going over the puzzle, the Raging Rooks puzzle, and then finally the Eliminator as well. So if you do like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And please leave a comment down below of what you thought. And we'll get right into the content now. So the first game today was Richie versus Talia. As you can see here, I've already got e4 on the board here. And e4 here is not my usual first move to play. Normally, I play f4. I love playing the birds opening. I think it's a brilliant opening. It's very underused at any level, really. But the thing is at the start of the tournament, I wanted to think, if I'm going to get any further in this tournament than the first round, I want to have that as a secret weapon that I can bring out against harder opponents where I'm in a more familiar territory. So when I was there, I made sure specifically never to mention that I played f4, despite the fact that I've literally got it tattooed on the back of my leg. I'll see if I can throw up a picture here. But yeah, so this is my bread and butter. Well, f4 would be my bread and butter, but e4 is what I was playing for a little while before the tournament, just to kind of get a little bit more used to it. E6, very standard kind of move here. This is called the French defense, and it's actually been played by, I think, 5 or 6 of the participants on the show. I've played it, Richie plays it, well, I play it usually. Richie plays it, we've seen Lula play it over the board, we've seen Nick play it, and I'm trying to think if anyone else played it. Might be someone else that played it as well, but I might have just forgot who it was. But yeah, e6 is very common. The idea is just to push the move d5, and then d4, d5, and I've got control of the centre, but they are protecting that pawn there. And I play this move knight d2. This is called a Tarash variation. And I don't know that much theory behind the Tarash. I know the theory behind going knight to f6 and then coming back here. I know a very small amount of theory by going takes here, and then you recapture the knight on this square when it develops. Other than that, I don't know anything. That caught me off guard here because they played knight to c6. Knight c6 here is a very odd move, because usually a move like c5 is what you want to kind of play in this opening. But this knight going to this square instead, I wasn't sure what was going on here. So I played knight to f3, because that just, to me, seemed like the safest kind of option. There was not going to be any tactics, at least I don't think, about playing knight to f3 here. Knight to f6, push the pawn, and then get the knight back here. And that was very similar to the position I was looking at before, except for this knight's on a slightly weird square. And I play the move bishop to d3 here. Bishop to d3 is by no means a bad move. What it does is it allows this knight to come in and attack this bishop here. And now they do have the option of playing the move c5. Now what I should do here is I should drop this bishop back to this square, allow them to push that pawn, and then push them back, and we get into the same position that from before that I kind of know a little bit better than the other line. But instead I play the move knight to b3, allowing my bishop to be taken, and allow my queen basically just to get developed here. And here I reason that I've got both knights involved in the game. The queen's out. This bishop's not going to be able to attack the queen at any point soon. Yeah, I've got that centre control. I've got 3 pieces out to their 1, and I'm about to be able to castle. So I've reasoned here that I'm doing at least relatively well here. They played c5, and here you can't allow them to be able to push over here and give this fork. So you've got to really either take or move one of these pieces. So I took the pawn, and then the knight captured back. And then I captured back here. And here you've got to be very careful, because if you recapture with your bishop here, I've got a fork here. The bishop and the king are both being attacked here, and I win one of the pieces. So instead they do a fork of their own with the queen, attacking both my king and my knight. And then after I move my bishop out to defend my king, they take the knight. This was all foreseen, basically. So this was basically all okay for me. And I reasons, I've got pieces out. I've got a weakness of this pawn in the centre here, but I don't think I'm doing too badly, especially because I'm going to be able to castle my king on my next move, and they've still got a couple moves that it's going to take them to get developed and get safe with the king. They move the bishop out, and I play a4. I'm just trying to stop this skewer coming on down this side. Just simply, it's quite a simple move there. And they play the move rook to c8. And rook to c8 is simply just going to try and get those pieces on this semi-open file. And here I've got a couple of options. I can push the move c3, and then go for a move like b4 here. And this kind of stops the attack. Or you have the option of playing a bishop to c3. And here, bishop c3 was kind of so I could play my knight into here, or maybe my bishop into here in the future. And it just stops any attacks coming down here. Bishop to e7, and they're going to be able to castle their king on the next move. And I play the move rook e1. My plan is to try and get my rooks involved in the game over this way, and potentially go onto this these centre files over here. king castles on the king side, and my knight jumps into the centre square here, and it just basically stops any of their pawns from moving anywhere forward, and my rook's going to have the opportunity to jump over to the g3 square and start attacking over this way. Here you can see that black here hasn't really got that many options of where to move to, and this is going to come into play later on. They can start moving their bishop out this way, but this bishop's kind of stuck, it's got nowhere to go to. This rook and queen aren't really facing towards anything, and these pawns are going to try and break through, but I'm not sure they'll do a very good job at it, so that's why they play the move a6. I play the move rook to e3, and they play the move queen to c4. On the move queen to c4, you have to very much consider whether you want to trade here. If you trade here, they might take out the rook, and they might take back with the pawn. Now you see I've got 4 minutes left, and it's not the kind of thing that I want to be focusing on here. I want to just be thinking, I want to be able to get an attack on this side. They've got no real defenders on this side. They've got this bishop slightly, but not really. And if I can get my queen to come over to this side of the board, I will be very happy indeed. So I move my queen back to d1 so it can come back round this way here, which I think is probably the best move to play here. The bishop comes out this way. And here I have 2 options, really. I can move my rook over here. Rook to d3 just gets out of this threat here, but it's not that aggressive. And obviously when you're being filmed by 8 cameras and this might be your only time ever on TV, you go in, I might as well go out with a bang. So I play the move rook to g3 instead. With the point being here, if they give this fork, which I do, this fork of the rook and the pawn, I'm going to sacrifice my rook on g7. With the idea, as soon as the king comes out, my queen can then come out and then capture this bishop. And their king here is now very unsafe. For the price of like a rook for a bishop and a pawn, I've managed to get their king very, very unsafe here. Their bishop's now useless. This bishop's now just facing towards pawns. It's like a very, very bad French bishop. And after they move their rook over to here to try and get onto this open file, and I then pin it against here, they've actually got no moves possible to play here. And it looks very odd here. You might be thinking, oh, they must have something here. They genuinely have no way of being able to get into my defense. The only pawn breaks that they have is pushing this pawn up here. And then I could capture and catch if I want to. And the only other stuff they have here, they can't move their queen out to here because that pawn will take, or here because of the knight. Over here, the king stops it. So there's no way of this queen getting into the attack. Same over this side. Same over here. There's no place here for the queen to be able to go to get into my defenses. That pawn's protected. That pawn's protected by this knight. This pawn protected by the rook. Everything's now very, very solid for my position here. And here I do miss a slight trick. I didn't notice quite how formidable my defense was. I managed to create almost a fortress without even trying to. So the best move to play here is actually h3. And the plan of h3 is basically the plan that I do already, but it stops your queen from being able to move to here. And I'll show you what my plan was in the first place. So I play the move here, knight to f5, which I thought was a really nice move over the board spot. The idea of knight to f5 is to allow the captures on this square. So they go up another 3 points here. But then I get the move e6, which is almost like a fork. It's attacking this bishop on d7, and it's also threatening checkmate on this rook on g7. Which they have to obviously defend with a move like, oh, did not mean to go all the way forward there. They can defend with a move like queen to g4, threatening checkmate here. But first of all, we'll have a quick look at what will happen if they play the move rook to g8. Here, instead of capturing the bishop back, you then need to capture this pawn back here. This rook obviously can't take because it's being threatened down here. And now this rook is being threatened. And if they aren't able to do anything about it, this rook's just going to be captured and promoted to a queen. And then capture back, and here I'm just simply winning here. They've got nothing here. Their queen's stuck in this corner. This rook can't move, and I'm just in a completely advantageous position. Instead they play queen to g4, and then I capture the rook with my queen. Captures, 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 captures. Many captures go on here, and after the rook comes to here, they're going to be able to win this pawn back here. And I think here I probably should have got my rook involved instead of playing the move f4, but I played the move f4, and we end up in this position. So this whole sequence of moves was basically just trying to get me equal. But the points here, as I said, the points are equal here. You can see you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns. And there is 1 rook each. But the problem is for black here, is that their pawns are terrible. That's not a pawn, that's a king. Yeah, the pawns are terrible here. These are doubled isolated pawns. These two are isolated pawns. And there's no way that these pawns are going to be able to protect each other basically ever in this position. Whereas my pawns are going to basically be able to form many pawn chains here, so move like here or here would create very nice pawn chains. I don't have to move them straight away though. And I play the move king to f2, king to e6, and I play the move rook to e1. And rook to e1 is a mistake on my part. This is the only move in the game that I'm very much not happy with me playing, because here I leave a simple 2-move sequence: rook to c7, and then rook to c4. And that would win one of my 2 pawns here. I'm not losing here, but I'm not happy here at all. This, like, I'll be, I think it's pretty much even. But I'd be on the back foot now, which would be terrible for me. Luckily, after the move c3, which happens in the game, they play the move rook to c6. They thought that after this move here, I would have a move like this, but I don't really. So they just take this pawn here, and then I'd have to move, and then they win the rook. So I can't play that move here. So yeah, rook to c6, rook to d1, and now I have the option to be able to defend on this rank here with my rook. The king is over here. And in endgames like this, king activity is incredibly important. Your king is just another piece here, because you're not going to get a checkmate with the king and the rook in an open position like this. So I bring the king up to try and attack this h7 pawn. You might notice I've only got 40 seconds left on the clock. So a 5-second increment, I think. So I do get time after each move I play, but I'm still against the clock here. It's a bit stressful here. Pawn to a5, king's here, and I'm just slowly pushing up, not letting them have anything here. Pushing up the board, and then I'm going to try and win this pawn. Now their rook is now stuck protecting this pawn here, and it's not going to be able to move very easily. I play the move rook to e2, and then move my rook to the back rank over here to try and go and win this pawn. They play the move king to c5, and I noticed that these squares are all blocked off, so I can just simply force the king back to where it was by playing the rook over here, and then playing the move rook to h8. They play the move d4, because they've not really got anything else here. I capture, and here you can see that I've got this pawn here that is going to be able to get to the other side very quickly. So here I just move the king out the way, I protect my pawn, I take their pawn, I take their other pawn, and I just simply take back their remaining pawns here and get to an endgame where I'm just going to get my queen, and I'm going to get a checkmate very quickly here by playing a very classic kind of checkmate here of getting my queen here, my king here, and their king in the corner here. So this is a very kind of classic checkmate here. And I thought this game for me was brilliant. I was really happy with how I played this game. This really boosted my confidence for the actual event there. Richie there barely did anything wrong. This is not a situation where you could be like, Richie played badly here. They didn't. They played amazingly. In fact, according to the engine here, they played with the equivalent of 2,300 rating, which is incredible for them. I played at 2,500, and I don't think I've been more proud to perform that well under the pressure, and also while David Howell is watching, who I very much am like very flustered by whenever we didn't get to talk on the show until after everything was filmed, but yeah, I was still very flustered by the idea of him just analysing my game. So it was absolutely brilliant to see that all. And now we'll be going on to Nessie versus Dimma. And here we see d4, d6, and the move h3. Move h3 is very odd here. You want to be developing your pieces here towards the centre. You want to be getting, get your pieces out. Moving the move h3 does not bode well for a good game here. Bishop to f4, g6, and here we see what is basically a King's Indian defence. Bishop's going to come over this side, and then you're going to castle on this side as well. Knight to f3, bishop to g7, and the move g4. Now, g4 is a very aggressive move. I don't know if this is an actual move that you can play here, but I don't think it is, because basically what you've now said is that you can't castle on this side of the board. Castle on this side of the board, you're going to be completely weak towards your pawns here. If you castle on this side, you'll be okay, but it's just a little bit, it's not really where you want to be castling here. Kingside castle over this side, and then knight to c3. You can play a move like c4 here as well, but you don't really want to because your king's going to be unsafe here. So knight to c3 is not an awful move. And then pawn to e3, pawn to c5, and then the move e4 here. And the move e4, unfortunately, hangs this pawn here, because neither of these pieces can take back, not the king side, the queen or the knight, because there will be a fork on this square here, and it will just win a straight piece, which is what could happen here. If they spotted it, they could just play pawn here. They can also play the move knight here. Knight here attacks the bishop and attacks the queen here. So what white should really do here is drop their queen back to protect this bishop here. So if the knight recaptures, the queen can just take. And now the queen is no longer under threat from the bishop. However, in the game, they play the move bishop to c4. And this simply just hangs a queen here. There's not really too much more to be said here. Queen's been hung. And here it's going to be quite an easy game for Dimma to win, especially after they've now just won this piece as well. Castles are on the queen side and knight to e5, and we're just going to see quite simple trades here, and you can see here that after the queen comes out, they come straight back in. I mean, as long as white here can just trade off pieces, they're going to be completely fine here. Black ends up getting another fork here. It's not a losing fork here. They managed to gain a piece. They managed to gain a rook and a pawn for 2 pieces. But when you're that far down in material, when you're a whole queen down, you don't want to be trading off pieces at all. Queen here, knight captures that rook there, and now they're just simply so far ahead now. There's not going to be any recovery from this, and very simply, you're going to end up with a checkmate over here. And here there was an editing error. They should have, they had to reshoot this for a second. And they left the king on this square, which I shouldn't have done. But you get checkmate on this square anyway. So here, Dimma showed a very convincing game. Nessie there didn't really get going because they lost their queen very early on. So that wasn't Nessie's best game, but we'll see what happens in the next round, see how they do. We have Craig versus Kel next. Kel is my personal... I loved Kel on the show. Me and Kel were very good friends. You'll probably see that later on in the show, of like how close we got. But we'll have a look at this game. So it starts off with the move d4 from Craig, and then knight to f6. And we see, as was shown before, almost, there you go. So it goes into a almost King's Indian defense here. Except from this knight's on the center square, which is a little bit odd. I don't think it's that odd really, but it's a bit of a weird move order. Knight to f3. And captures. On the show, it said that the black's got an advantage. No, sorry, white's got an advantage here. But after bishop g4, there's no real advantage. This is just fine for both sides. Bishop to g7 is played. Pawn here. The bishop comes back, and then castles. You have this very, very classical structure here of a King's Indian defense. This bishop's here, and there's going to be some kind of attack. Because most likely here, we're going to see. Sorry about that. We're going to see a move like e5, just coming straight into the center here, just going straight from the attack here. And then the move a6 here. And now, because white's decided to castle kingside, they're going to be throwing all of these pawns down this side of the board to try and get some kind of attack. Meanwhile, so Craig is going to be attacking down this side in the exact same manner. So, yep, we see g4 and b5 opposite pawns here, both attacking here. The queen moves back to here, so if they were to capture, they can capture back with the bishop. And here, black should really play the move b4, attacking this knight, making it move out of the way. It can't come to any of these squares forward because of this bishop. And it's got to go back to this b1 square, which is really where this knight really doesn't want to be. But instead, they capture this pawn, and the bishop comes out here. And then we see the bishop come out, and they do not want a trade here. The knight reroutes over to this side. All the attacks going on this side of the board. So the knight wants to come over to this side to try and help out. We see the move h4, continuing this attack from Craig. And we see the move knight c5. And at top level play, what you want to do in this position is play the move bishop c2. Simply, this knight here is worth less than this bishop. This bishop is slightly more valuable. So playing a move like bishop c2 just keeps this on the board. And it also keeps another piece defending on this side of the board as well, which would be very good for white. But instead, they capture. And this is a fair move, to be honest. They make these pawns very weak here. But here, Kel's not really going for pawn safety. They're trying to go for an attack straight away. So a move like, for example, c4 here is going to end up making their bishop move back anyway, and then they can start trying to attack on this side of the board. The move a3 comes on the board, and the move queen to d6 happens. h5 attacking on this side here, and then rook b8 taking that semi-open file that's going straight towards the king. White here really shouldn't take this pawn here, because this just ends up opening up their rook to its weak pawn. And even though this pawn looks quite weak, it's going to be difficult to actually end up attacking in the long run here. They play the move rook to h2, and then rook captures on f3, rook to h1, and then rook to f8, which is a very stylish move here. You're allowing this pawn to be taken here, because if they are take the pawn, which doesn't happen on the straight away, because if they do take this pawn, they can give this check here, and after it takes, and moves, this rook will be on pre, and it'll be able to be taken. There are ways to avoid that. They can play a move like here, but here, they are still just fine here. This is just a completely fine position for black to play. So, instead of taking that, they play the move bishop to d1 to attack the rook, and they play the move rook to f1 to stop this attack going up this side of the board. Craig is on 1 minute left, so they've not got much time to try and calculate this kind of position here. They capture here, and then after captures, they actually had a bit more of a stylish move playing rook to f2 here, just making sure the queen was to move. They move queen to f6 here, and they've now got 2 pieces on this open file here, which is going to be very good for Kel. They've got dominance on this file here, especially with this bishop as well, stopping any pieces trying to take control of this file. So that's the reason why they take this bishop, and then they play the move queen to a5 under time pressure. But unfortunately here, what they failed to realise is they've now got a fork here. Queen plays to f4, attacking the king and this pawn. And when the king moves, they've got an even worse fork here of attacking both the rook and the king. And it's now just going to be a couple of moves now until we see a checkmate. They just clear the pieces off the board and we see a very quick checkmate here. The queen stops the king from moving anywhere forward and the rook attacks the king here. So that was actually quite a good game from both players there. They both had good opening knowledge there. And as soon as we went into the middle game, there was quite a back and forth battle. But in the end, it was Kel that managed to clinch the place on the winner's balcony / balcony of dreams, whichever they are trying to or deciding to call it. So me, Kel and Dimma go up to the winner's balcony, whereas Richie, Craig and Nessie go on to do the next puzzle. And here is the next puzzle here. So the puzzle here is called Raging Rooks. And it's a difficult puzzle because you've got 2 minutes to try and work out what the position is. I'll give you a second here to pause and try and work out what the answer to the puzzle is. But this was a very difficult puzzle. And especially in 2 minutes, it's going to be quite difficult to work out. But there are ways that you're going to be able to try and work it out. First of all, we can work out which pawns only have one square that moves them. So, for example, this pawn here can only be moved to by this square here. So you've got to end up on this square here. Which also means that this only has one place it can move to, which is from here. Or from here, as is shown later on. So it's got to be from this line here. So you can kind of work out quite quickly then, because of that. If the rook goes this way, so rook comes to here, and then goes over this way, goes up this way, you can't leave these two pawns here without you know, you've got to have a route to try and get to them. So realistically, you can't really go this way, because you end up with either leaving this pawn hanging, or in this situation, you're going to end up with this pawn with only one place to go to. And you can't get to both of them at the same time. So you can't go this way. You can discount this way as being the correct answer. This way will lead to you going this way eventually, but it's the same kind of idea. You're just going to end up with one pawn. It'll be this pawn or this pawn. There's just going to be left there. So you've got to head upwards on the board here. You've got to head up this way. Here you can see there's only one place you can go to, so you can take this one. There's no reason to leave this pawn here. It's only got one route to it, so you might as well take that one to start off with, and it's the only move that you can do. And then take this pawn here. And you've got, again, 2 options here. And what I would do if I was playing this, I'd work that out to start off with, and I'd do the moves that are obvious, and then I'd try and work it out from this position, because you've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns here, which is a lot easier to work out than the 10 that you start off with. And if you simply just work out the position here, take this one and take this one, you're left with the same problem here. You can't go here and here and here and here on the same sequence of moves, so you can't take that pawn there. This pawn has to be the one that gets taken. You have to head back here to grab that pawn, and then over to here to grab this pawn, and then you simply need to come up this way, back down this way, and back down this way to win the pawn. That was a very difficult puzzle, in fairness. If you're trying to work that out under time pressure with cameras filming you and stuff, it's going to be very difficult to try and work that out very quickly. In the actual attempts that they had, Richie was the fastest to work it out, so they came into the winner's balcony. They didn't work it out fully. They got to having, I think it was 2 pawns left. They did it 30 seconds quicker than Craig did. And then Nessie was left with 3 pawns left on the board. So we're going to go into the Eliminator now. We see Craig versus Nessie. And this, again, is a very close game, which I wasn't expecting after I saw d4 as the first move. And then h6. Nessie seems to like moving this corner pawn, and I don't understand why. This is not a good move here. As I said, you should be trying to control the centre in an opening, trying to get your minor pieces out, so the ones are worth 3 points, and trying to get your king, not to f1, trying to get your king castled on that side of the board. I've never seen that happen with the background there. But yeah, so the move c4's played, e6, and we're trying to kind of go here, it looks like, at least to me, into something that could be a Queen's Indian by playing b6 here, but it wouldn't be exact here. They're still playing a game that's kind of cagey and not going towards the centre. The move d5 here is played, which is a little bit risky here. I think here, if you do play d5, let me just quickly check the engine. Yeah, a move like e5 or actually c takes d5, both are completely fine here. Will just burst open the centre, and it's going to lead to Craig having quite an easy game to play. It's not winning or anything, but it's just a little bit easier for White to play this position. But instead, we see the move castles and knight to e7, and we have this fork here of the king and the bishop here. The knight comes back here to try and defend this bishop, but now this pawn is even more vital to be taken here. Because after here, if you take, and take, you are now attacking this knight here. And if you are to capture here, you can still take this pawn here, and you are threatening a check on the king here, and you're just going to take this bishop back on your next move. But instead of that, they don't. Craig doesn't see this and play the other move, knight to e5, which I thought was perfectly reasonable of a move. When I looked at this, I was like, yeah, knight to e5 also works to get the same threat here of being able to fork the king and queen. And they play the move bishop to c3. Now, bishop to c3 here, I thought, again, was the best move, and it was the best move. But we see here, knight takes c6. And I thought here that the reason why this was fine is because queen to c7 was actually fine. Because now they can't move this knight out the way. Otherwise, their queen will be taken with the other queen. But this is not the case. Because after this happens, we see pawn captures here. Oh, hold on. After that, we should see, sorry, I put the wrong move on there. What we should see is a move c takes d5 here. And c takes d5 protects this knight. And now after e takes, we can see the move e5 here. The knight is now forced to move, and we can just kind of leave this knight here for now. And we're going to see here, we just be able to take this eventually. So yeah, b takes c3 here. This takes over here. And now we can move f3. It's a very complex sequence of moves here. But here you can just see that black's position is terrible here. Their bishop is blocked in behind their queen. Their knight is now being attacked in the center here. The knight has to move back to g5, and it's going to end up being kicked around even more with a move like h4. Back, it's a lot of moves to see here, but yeah, king's not safe in the center. White's pieces are all in nice positions. This bishop isn't developed yet, but it can be to this square over here to stop any castling over here. And White's position is just far better here. Even though it's even on points, they are just far better here. But again, it's going to be difficult to see a full sequence here. So instead, they play takes, and takes, and we are in this middle game position here. And here we can kind of analyse and see who's going to be better here. White's got the better centre control here, simply. They've got 4 pawns towards the centre squares, whereas really these are the only 2 centre pawns that Black has. Black also has these 2 doubled pawns here, which can be quite easy to attack, whereas these ones can be traded off over here at some point. We've also got this rook that can go onto the open file on this next move if it chooses to. And this king is not safe yet. So we'll see how this game goes. So we see takes. Not 100% sure why they didn't take the c pawn here, getting rid of this double pawns here. They take, and then they capture back with the knight here instead of the pawn. Here, pawn takes, I think, is much better here. Simply because it gets rid of the double pawns here. But the move knight d5 obviously is trying to attack this pawn. And if the pawn is to move out of the way, hold on. Pawns move out of the way. They can play the move knight to b4, and it's attacking both the bishop and this square here. And if they're not careful, they're going to end up being forked over here. So we see the move bishop to f5. Now, bishop to e4 is actually slightly better here, just because it's not leaving any threats of trading off the bishop here. The king castles over this side, and we see captures, and then knight to c2 here. And knight c2 here attacks both the rook and attacks the pawn here. And here we see Nessie playing the... sorry, what am I saying here? Yeah, here we see Nessie playing it back to f5 here, just getting their bishop out of the way. And we're going to see captures on e1 now. But what you might notice about this bishop being here is it stops the knight from coming out to these 2 squares. These 2 squares are also blocked in. So now the knight is going to be able to win with a move like bishop to c2, just simply attacking the knight on both squares. And Craig here is just simply winning by attacking these on the same square here. But they play the move bishop to a3, which is inaccurate because they get to play rook to e8 here, defending this knight here, and they're going to be able to eventually help it escape. But instead of that, we see the move rook a to e8. Obviously, White noticed the threat on the rook, but didn't notice this threat on this rook instead. So we see captures, king captures here, and then the king comes across here, and this knight here should be won here. Let me quickly just turn off the analysis there. I've just realised that was on the whole time. Didn't want to have that on. Yeah, so this knight here is being attacked now. This rook is defending this knight, but it's going to be captured on the next move if they play the right move. Here, we should simply see captures, 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 and captures here from White. And again, same situation as in my game. Although we see that Black has the same amount of pawns as White, Black's pawns are terrible here. There's no way you can defend them, and it's going to be simply a case of just bringing your king up to take the pawns. However, instead of that, they play the move bishop to d7, trying to save this bishop, but it does not quite work. Although they managed to win the pawn, this knight now manages to escape, and it's going to cause them all sorts of issues here because they're able to now win this pawn back, and they've now got this passed pawn. And Nessie now should be focusing on trying to push this pawn up the board as far as they can. Rook to e1 and offering this trade here, and now it's down to an endgame where it's bishop versus knight, and you've got an open file, a passed pawn here for this a pawn to go down. So here, we need to see black focusing on getting this pawn at the board. So you need to play here a5, a4, a3 as soon as you possibly can. But instead, we see Nessie isn't trying to push this pawn at all, really. They're trying to get their king involved, they're trying to move their knight around, and it's not really working. Here was the last real chance they had to try and push his pawn up the board while it's still going to be protected by the knight. Once it gets to that square, his bishop still protects that square there. But here, the knight comes over this way, and we're not going to see that pawn be pushed at any point soon until it gets to the point where it's just going to be lost on its next move. So here we see this pawn's now just lost. And here, Craig is just simply winning because they've just got too many pawns coming down this side of the board. This pawn's indefensible, and it's going to push all the way to the other side. And we're just going to see a quick trade, and we're going to quickly get to this endgame here, where we're going to see a very quick conversion here. They've got 2 queens on the board, and we're just going to see a ladder mate here. I skipped through that endgame because it wasn't too important because there was 2 queens on the board. It was simply going to be a win for Craig. And Nessie is out of the competition. That final game, Nessie played surprisingly well, in my opinion. After the move h6 in the opening, I wasn't quite expecting it. But they actually managed to defend that game quite well. And it was just near the end where they must have just got a little bit fatigued. I think they probably should have spent a little bit more time. They were ahead on time during the game. They just spent a couple more minutes thinking about their moves and might have been able to get through to the next round and knock Craig out. However, today, that is going to be the end of today's video. I thank you all very much for watching. If you did like it, as I said at the start, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you for next week's edition of Chess Masters. And I might also do a Sunday video as well if I have the time. So I'll see you guys later. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.